Welcome everyone to the Cosmic Concerto, Episode 2. I am William Hill, and on the other end we have...
Christopher Harris, or Brandon. Yay!
He is not decided yet what he wants to be called, so we'll just let him play with that. Alright, tonight we have a very special episode. It's so special, in fact, that whenever we botched the first recording due to technical malfunctions and absolute crap equipment, still, I know everybody's probably thought, oh my god, this is a terrible sounding show, or terrible looking show. We actually went out and I bought a microphone, and we're not going to do video.
At least not for right now.
Not yet. We're gonna continue working on that, and but as you can see, you can actually hear me, and that's unusual because I speak very quietly. And the reason why we have put so much effort in is because, one, we want this show to succeed, and two, Silent Hill Shattered Memories is an awesome game with an awesome soundtrack. And we're going to tell you why it's such a great score. Brandon, you have been a fan of Akira Yamaoka for a lot longer than I have. And I've already said this once before, but since we're going to tell everybody this bit of information again, I feel terrible for not listening to this soundtrack sooner. So why don't you open us up with a little bit of your experience with this particular composer?
With this composer, back when I first encountered the Silent Hill series, I really didn't take a lot of notice to the music. Especially the first one was more sound effects than it was anything else. And even when I didn't really get into his music until much, much later, and after like the fourth one was out, and I think we're in like the PS3 era, and I had gone back and started playing them, and then I, played through the second one. I was just noticed, I was like, wow, this music's really, really good.
And it's funny that you say that Silent Hill 1 had a lot more sound effect kind of stuff, but like it's impossible to forget that that really weird, I'm not sure if I'm saying the name of this instrument correct or if it's even the right instrument. It's almost like a shamisen, that like Japanese stringed, like plucked string instrument.
You talking about in the main title track?
Yes, the and I'm not going to sing it anymore because it sounds terrible when I do that. But you get the idea that that's like one of the most memorable things sonically in that game, partially because it's so unsettling.
Yeah,
it's definitely classic survival horror kind of music, in terms of how I experience a good survival horror game, because that music is definitely eerie and it sets you up in this mindset that Silent Hill is the kind of game that you actually are going to go to and be creeped out by, as opposed to Resident Evil, which had the big droning string soundtrack. Unless it was doing the corny, like 70s, not 70s, it's a bad example or a bad description. But do you know the music that you would hear whenever you meet up with Barry and he's like, "Okay, Jill, let's get out of here," and it's the dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
You don't have that in Silent Hill 1.
No.
So I mean, it's probably worth noting that Silent Hill made people take notice with the music, and Silent Hill 2, I cannot wait to actually go out and find myself a copy of the soundtrack, because I know that that's kind of like the point where people started to really take the Silent Hill scores very seriously. You see a lot more, I've seen more bootlegs of the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack floating around in used record stores than I have in pretty much any other survival horror type game soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. I even have one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that you have a bootleg. I don't even have that, but I'm going to get a real copy, and I'm sure you will as well. There's actually a great box set, listeners. It's like an 8 or 9 disc set with all of the soundtracks that Akira Yamaoka worked on, and maybe even one that he didn't. I think that did he work on Homecoming?
He did actually work on Homecoming.
Okay, it has that one in there as well. So it's got all of his scores in it. It doesn't have any of the ones after Homecoming that he did not work on. Probably for the better, according to you.
Yeah. I really don't care for anything past. Shattered Memories was his last one, and the new game I don't like. Downpour, the score was not very memorable either. So yeah, you can tell his influence and his little influence is not there.
And didn't he produce a few of the games from that point?
Yeah, he produced pretty much anything after 4.
Okay, that's what I figured, or that's what I thought I remembered anyway. That's so. With so Shadow Remembers is his last score. And the copy of the soundtrack that both Brandon and I have it was a pre-order bonus, right? At GameStop, wasn't it a pre-order bonus?
It was.
I can't remember if it was just one that they gave you when you bought the game or if it was actually a pre-order bonus. So it comes in a crappy little cardboard sleeve. It's 21 track soundtrack, and as far as I can tell, it's the only kind of soundtrack that there is. The other soundtrack that's floating around out there, that's probably in its own jewel case and all this lovely crap, it's the same score. So there are no wildly varying copies of the soundtrack that I am aware of. If you know of one, please let me know in the comments for the video or the podcast, because I would love to get another. If it's got different tracks, if it's got more tracks on it, I'd love to get a copy. So let's just dive right into it. I'm going to go ahead and start the same way we did the first time we recorded this. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the vocal tracks, because that's how the album opens and closes.
It does.
The vocals on this album are surprisingly just incredible. It already sets up a good atmosphere without it being the drone and ambient noise kind of things, or even like the trip hop type pieces that kind of break up the darkness of the album. And for me, they open and close the album very well, because they kind of mirror each other and they take you into and out of a very unusual and dark place musically. And this is it's very impressive to me. I don't usually like pop songs of any kind in my video game music. Like it's very rare that I will sit there and say, okay, I can listen to this 4-chord pop tune and it actually mesh well with the rest of the score. It's very rare. So whenever I say that songs like When You're Gone and Hell Frozen Rain are just perfect ways to get into and out of this musical experience, yeah, that's pretty strong praise from me.
And I would say, yeah, I these probably are definitely my favorite of his vocal tracks that he has done. He has done quite a few up to this point. He started with the soundtrack, Silent Hill 3. Were his first ones to appear, and he had some for the PSP game. Homecoming had some, and then finally this one. But definitely, out of all of them, these are, to me, his strongest. They do set the album up very, very well, and Acceptance is such a great way to start bringing the album to a close after if you play the game and you get to the point that Acceptance actually plays. It's such a great way to end the game, and knowing what actually takes place.
Oh, absolutely. And of all the Silent Hills I've played, and I haven't finished all of them, I've played several though. I mean, this is the kind of thing, whenever you're talking about a video game soundtrack, attaching the soundtrack to the game is very important in terms of how well the soundtrack succeeded as a video game score. Not even just talking about how it succeeded as an album by itself, but with Silent Hill Shattered Memories, the story for that one resonates with me just as well as Silent Hill 2 did. Like, Silent Hill 2 was it's not a game you can relate to, so to speak.
No, I hope not anyway.
But Silent Hill Shattered Memories is actually, it kept its darkness without it being a game that felt so alien and disturbing. Because all of the dark things that happen in it, they're actually more emotionally dark rather than, oh my god, this guy is actually completely jacked. Why am I playing as this dude? Or, oh no, it's the evil cult, like in Silent Hill 1 and 3. So, and I think that's actually speaking to the fact that this score was written in such a way that it actually attaches to the emotional experience of the game very well. You can actually remember that sense of submerging into Silent Hill and then coming out of it at the end, because the game opens and closes in a therapist's office. And it's somebody that survived the Silent Hill story, so to speak. I'm trying not to spoil anything for people who haven't played it, because I'm really hoping that if people are listening to this and we're talking about how great the soundtrack is and how we're both gushing over the game like teenagers, that they'll also go out and check out the game, which is on the PSP, the Wii, and the PS2. Not a hard game to come by either. It's under $20, I think, on all three systems. And I'm not sure if it's playable on the Vita. I think we checked last time and it is not, correct?
No, I don't think so.
Which is so unfortunate. So, just talking about the setup and close of the album without actually getting into the meat of it just yet, it's perfect in terms of its execution, and not to mention Hell Frozen Rain and When You're Gone can get stuck in your head. Acceptance is just a beautiful piece of music all by itself. And that's the thing that I really want to mention, like, as far as these 4 tracks, you can listen to these completely separate from ever having played the game, and they're exceptional songs in their own right. Which is not something you can very often say about video game, like pop songs, quote unquote. So, we're done. I think we should stop gushing about the open and close, and let's get to the meat of this thing. Most of the score is a blend of like ambient music, trip hop, and noise. Flat out noise music.
A lot of noise.
Not quite Mare's Bow levels of noise, but close. And the thing that I fully respect about the score is that once you hit about track 5, which is called Creeping Distress, and you head into Hostility, you have this nice wave of going into and out of the darker noise tracks, and breaking that up with I hesitate to say this, but it's an easy out for this description. Listenable music, as opposed to stuff that sounds like it's threatening you and it's about to cut your throat open.
Yeah, which is weird when you're trying to listen to soundtrack. Trying to get through those pieces, you wonder to yourself, why am I listening to this sometimes? Because it's not an experience that you can just relax in listening. Those parts really do take you out of a very relaxed state of mind. That the nice, like, creeping distance puts you in a very calm state. It's very beautiful to listen to. Even with its trip hop sound, it's just really enjoyable. And then you go into Hostility and you're like, what the hell?
And it's the thing, and this is what I really like. You say I listen to ambient and post. Well, we both listen to post rock and ambient music, but also like I've gotten into listening to a little bit of noise music, more experimental stuff. At least I'm trying to. I'm trying to kind of diversify and take that next leap off from where heavy metal has taken me, going into like drone music. And I like the fact that there's a lot of like looping and there's repetition. So there's a distinct rhythm to that sound, without the presence of like drums. In just for example, in Angel's Scream, there is a reverse played scream, and you can actually hear the point where it starts, like it's actually almost percussive, how it's like yeah, like whenever it's playing. And I know it sounds bizarre to repeat it. Everyone, someday we will actually figure out how to mix music samples into this without having to do it in post. But right now we don't know yet. But whenever it's doing this, for me, that's what makes a good piece. That's one of the things that I like in a good piece of ambient or noise music, is that sense of repetition or a loop, something that you can like attach to as a melody. Because, usually if you're coming from most people come from a background of listening to pop-oriented songs, things that follow like quarter time and are very easy to listen to. So, obviously, unless you're really good at listening to this kind of music, and it is an acquired skill trying to like this kind of music, unless you're just weird enough to like it right out of the gate, you're kind of looking for something to attach to, similar to how you would listen to a pop song, or at least that's how it's been for me. And it's allowed me to find an appreciation and enjoy this kind of music. So I'm going to say that that's a means to an end, and I do like this style of music as a result. And it's also in Devil's Laughter with the almost generic, like, creepy, ha, 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 ha kind of laugh that's...
Yeah.
And you can hear it, and if it wasn't done so well, it would be cheesy.
I still think it's a little cheesy,
I don't know.
to be
I
honest.
like it, I mean, especially since it kind of fits the atmosphere of the track. And again, since it's looped and repeated in that percussive way, well, it's not percussive in that track. It's there to keep you on like a certain listening track. I think it's effective, and I like that about it. I mean, even if the sample is really cheesy, it works for me personally. So, if you actually like look at the track list, I mean, what I was saying about how it goes into and out of the more melodic and the darker tracks, I mean, it's exactly that. You have Hostility, then Snowdriven and Hibernation, Devil's Laughter, Lost Truth, which is a quieter piece, Angel's Scream, which is not, Another Warm Body. I think that one's darker too. I mean, that's one.
It is.
That's one of the negative things I can say about this album is like it's impossible to remember track names after the first two and the last two. Usually,
Well, yeah, I mean, once you start getting to a bunch of noise tracks, you kind of lose your place.
yeah. I mean, it's not the kind of thing where I'm going to go back and if again, I hate to say it this way, but if I'm going to listen to something that's more melodic and I can attach to in terms of like, oh, this song's gonna be stuck in my head all day, I will know the track title. I'm not gonna have I'm not gonna have Angel's Scream stuck in my head all day, because if I did, that would be horrifying.
I don't know how you would.
Yeah. So I mean, if I was gonna say anything negative, quote unquote, it's that the and it's not even negative. I actually really like this about it. It's that the entire record forms one piece of music in a way. It forms a nice, solid, complete work of music. It's a complete story arc without actually having to play the game. You're kind of experiencing that psychological narrative, that emotional narrative through the music itself, and that's an exceptional thing to say for something that's meant to accent a video game. Very few scores can do that well.
That is very true.
I mean, I can count on one hand the scores that I have in my possession, and this is out of over what? How many did we figure I have? About 30 scores.
We have quite a few.
I mean, just in my collection, I know I've got at least 30 scores now because I just got several more from GameStop the other day. Of all the ones I've listened to, this is one of the very few that actually that tells the story through the music and the arrangement of the album itself. And that's something that, coming from a background of progressive rock music, I love that. Sequencing an album well is something of a lost art, except for in progressive rock. So, very impressed with that from Konami. Thank you, guys.
Yes. And honestly, that's just, in general, that's just something that's missing from a lot of modern day music when it comes to video games, is they are more there just to be your background noise instead of being contributing to the actual story. Yeah, they don't contribute anything. They're just there.
I can't completely agree with that. That's kind of how it's always been.
I mean, that's true. I mean, but I feel like today is a little bit worse than back in the day, because today you don't have to try to be creative. You can just get to your string quartet, make them do something, and you're done for the day. Back in the day, you actually, whether you were trying to do well or not, you had to be creative in order to get your music into the game and evoke something. You don't really have to try that much today.
You're exactly right, because I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I was actually about to bring up the work of Koji Kondo. And that would be our guy who created some of the most memorable and important video game music of all, the early Nintendo music. Things like the Mario Brothers theme. Everybody on this planet that has ever seen a video game console probably knows what the Mario Brothers music sounds like.
I would hope so.
Or the Legend of Zelda, the Hyrule, like that theme. Everybody knows these pieces of music. I actually, I right now on my phone, because I usually listen to a lot of this music when I'm at work to kind of like have something playing whenever I'm working in the office or something. Pardon me. I have the CD from the Kirby Dream Collection for the Wii on my phone.
Oh my god.
Now, you cannot disagree with this. the music in those games, it's infectious.
It is. It really is, and that's why I say, "Oh my God," because I know that so many of them songs will get stuck in your head, and you'll just be humming it for hours.
Absolutely, but here's the thing: do we have something that can be referred to as a deep spiritual connection? I mean, like deep emotional connection with this music? Probably not. It's
No.
infectious. It's the video game equivalent of pop music,
Yeah.
and
Very.
it's
Yeah.
exceptional. It's so good. I mean, if you don't like the Zelda theme, then there's just a good chance you don't like music. I know that's a little bit harsh to say, but my God, it's just, I mean, those scores that Koji Kondo has done, they're perfect for their respective games, and you can actually remember something from these games as a result of the music, and it's directly tied to it. But at the same time, it lacks the connection that, you know, between the actual content of the game and the player and how they experience the story that you would have from the work that's on this album. And a lot of, I mean, and you're exactly right though, as far as like modern scores, you can, you know, like, for, I'm sure whoever's doing the music for the next Call of Duty has already got his guys, and he's already, you know, gotten everybody in the studio. It's like, okay, this is the rhythm we're gonna do. Dum, da da dum, da da da, da da dum, and just like repeating that forever. And then at the very end, it'll hit into that like stereotypical like trumpet solo. You know.
You know, in other words, basically play your modern day action movie fanfare.
Exactly. And you know what? I've been listening to the Metal Gear Solid 4 soundtrack as well. I would expect more of that, but it still has like all these like generic action movie cues, and then you have something like "Here's to You" at the very end.
Do you know why?
Because that was an Ennio Morricone score, I know. You're talking about the rest of the score. That's because it's Harry Gregson Williams. He's done a ton of those scores.
That is exactly. So you have a movie composer doing a score for a video game, so it's definitely going to have the qualities that we're talking about. That's just unavoidable.
But I'll give him this much. There's some tracks on that soundtrack that are more like Middle Eastern and like almost blues guitar. And those are the standouts.
They are,
and it's really good score whenever you go to those parts. And the action movie cues. I mean, it is an action video game. I can't criticize it too much. At least it's a good action game score. It's better than most of them. I mean, sort of like how the Halo scores are better than most of them. It's interesting though that. God, what was I even trying to say? We were recording this way too late at night, everybody. I just got off work. Oh, okay. It's interesting that that you have so many generic scores and they all have these same exact tropes, but at the same time you can still stand out from it by doing just the little things. For the Halo scores, it's the fact that there are certain distinct themes that are throughout the score, and it gives it that leitmotif feel. You have certain things for, you know, Master Chief and how awesome he is, basically, and the guitar. The fact that they got Steve Vai to come in and play the theme for Halo 2. I mean, I remember that better than I remember most of the music in the game, just because it was Steve Vai. And it sounded like Steve Vai. I think this tangent needs to end. Let's go back to the soundtrack we're actually supposed to be talking about.
Where were we? What track were we on?
We were just talking about the fact that it was all kind of one mob of a song in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we just gotten past another warm body.
Oh yeah, we were headed up to Forsaken Lullaby and Raw Shock. Raw Shock is probably, I would consider it the most aggressive track on there without a silly sound effect. You know, I would say that towards the end, as it goes into acceptance with Ice and different persons, that's whenever the horror of the more the ambient and dark noisy tracks, that's whenever that kind of fades out. those tracks, they kind of lead you into acceptance really well. If we're discussing this as like a piece of classical music, it's a really nice denouement, or like denouement for the darkness, and it brings you right into the ending, and it just like crescendos back into how the album ends. So I would say that Ice is another one of my favorite tracks, just because of how well it sets up for acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I don't quite remember that. It's like I remember the middle very well, and I remember the beginning. But once I get close to the end, right before the Acceptance and Hell Frozen Rain, I sort of blank out because I'm like, okay, just a few more tracks, and I get more vocal tracks. I get to hear Mary's voice again. That woman can fucking sing. Okay.
That I definitely agree with, and I hate to say it this way because, I mean, I realize that most people who like video game music, people who import soundtracks and collect these things, they like J-pop.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Japanese video game. Well, actually, I think that the studio who made it was an was a British company, right?
Yeah, they definitely weren't Japanese.
Yeah, they weren't a Japanese company, but we have a Japanese composer from a Japanese video game series. It's still very much a Japanese horror in terms of aesthetics. So I find it impressive that we have a Japanese composer who's brought in a vocalist who's actually got a great deal of power to her voice, and she doesn't sound, well, whiny. that thinned out vocal that I can't stand about most female fronted J-pop. I don't like it, and that's just my personal preference. I know there's a lot of people who really like J-pop, and there is some good J-pop, but I do not like most J-pop vocals, and that's because it's got that really high register vocal, and I don't like it. Her voice,
yeah.
Mary's, her name, because
Mary Elizabeth
McGinn.
McGinn.
Yes. She's got soul. Her voice has body. It has this warmth, and it's just big. She's got soul, and it's just powerful whenever she sings. God, yes. She actually delivers these lyrics very well. And the lyrics, and let's just go ahead and say it, the lyrics are really well written. Some of them are a little weird, but it's very well written songs. And the fact that the songs they actually take on like a prog rock type lyrical feel, in that they are directly referencing the game itself and what's happening in the game, but it's not corny.
No,
that's impressive. Especially whenever you're talking about a game that mostly is flashbacks from a therapist's chair, and it addresses that, but it does it without being corny, and that's so impressive. I mean, I still can't get over how much I actually like to sing along with these songs, and like playing on my guitar even, because I looked up the chord chart for this one. It's pretty good. It's a fun song to play on the guitar.
I know, that's why I'm sort of depressed that he's done with the series.
But at the same time, we get to hear him do other things, like he did the Killer is Dead soundtrack. And for those of you who've already forgotten, Killer is Dead is a game from Suda51, and it got panned by most critics. Well, not panned, it got like really average scores from most critics, but it got panned by the public because they thought it was really sexist, and frankly it is. But at the same time, it's Suda51, which means that it is absolutely worth playing just for the fact that it is trippy. And I've been listening to his score for that, and the thing that I like about the fact that he stepped away from Silent Hill is that he's going on to do things that are still in his wheelhouse, but are not the same. Like, you get to hear him do a completely different kind of music to some degree. It's still got some of his signature touches, of course, but it doesn't sound exactly like the Silent Hill score. It doesn't have the dark ambient sound and noise music kind of vibe. It's different.
I would hope so. I mean, I've actually not heard anything outside his Silent Hill series. I've not been able to play any of the games that he's worked on since.
Oh, he's done so many, and frankly, they're mostly in the bargain bin at GameStop at this point. Like, for example, Shadows of the Damned, I have over here on 360X, but I got it at Target. Killer's Dead, I just bought a brand new copy of, and it's $20 now, and it comes with the soundtrack. So, like, if nothing else, I mean, even if you hate the fact that the game sort of objectifies women to some degree, which is kind of disgusting since this is 2014, it's still got a really good soundtrack with it, and it's worth, having the soundtrack. So, oh, sorry. I stepped on the mic stand.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you can hear everything with my new microphone, audience. This is my endorsement for the Blue Yeti. It's a wonderful microphone.
Oh, great. Now I got to hit that little checkbox to make sure we put in that we are advertising for a brand.
Oh, yes, absolutely, but they're not paying us, so.
Yeah, we're not getting paid. Not
So
yet,
you don't
anyway.
have to do that. Hey, if they want to endorse us and keep us in microphones, I'll be very happy with that. Wait a minute, weren't we reviewing something? And now a word from our sponsors. Okay. No, it is a very impressive feat what Akira Yamaoka did with Silent Hill series, but I'm glad that he has continued to diversify the music that he's done. Now, as far as what this guy's legacy includes, stuff before Silent Hill even, he worked on such wonderful games as Snatcher. He worked on Gradius, it looks like. Contra Hardcore on the Genesis. Sparkster, which is Rocket Knight Adventures. And if you've never played Rocket Knight Adventures, well, actually, Sparkster and its other Sparkster, because that series has a chronologically confused kind of thing going on. If you've never played Rocket Knight Adventures, do it. He didn't work on that score, but the game's awesome.
You know what one I want to play that he worked
What's
on?
that?
International Superstar Soccer Pro 98. That to me sounds like it would be the best score he has ever worked on in his existence.
Can you imagine the Silent Hill score playing whenever you're playing a soccer game? I can't.
Or worse, golf. Golf. Try a sport that requires you to remain calm while you're hitting the ball. You will have a score that can be sudden percussive at any moment of time.
Wow, he has done several soccer games, but that's not a bad thing. The soccer series he worked on is really good, from what I understand. Rebuild of Evangelion, which well, I've watched the first part of Rebuild of Evangelion. I haven't noticed that it sounded like his music, but I would have to rewatch it with music in mind, because I was watching it to see if they how much they retconned from the original, because that series is legendary for retcon.
Most likely, the stuff really hasn't changed so much, because it says he did the arrangement composition originally written. So, at the most, you may end up with like sort of subtle different remixes.
Right. Ooh, Contra Shattered Soldier. Things I didn't know he worked on.
Yeah.
Killer's Dead. There it is. Black Knight Sword. Since he's been with Grasshopper Manufacture, which is Suda 51 Studio, he's basically worked on a bunch of their stuff, including Lollipop Chainsaw, Cinemora, and yeah, as I already said, Shadows of the Damned. Oh, he worked on No More Heroes 2 as well, which was a fun game, and if you have a good sense of humor, play it. Same with the first one.
So, since you have played a few of these newer games, does it have his piano work still?
Yes, it does. And that is actually one of the things I was going to say about Killer's Dead. Killer's Dead actually has it opens with a trip hop kind of piano tune, and that's whenever I knew I was really going to like the soundtrack. Of course, then it kind of like warped off into some like almost like heavy metal kind of stuff in the second and third tracks. But I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, nor am I going to review a soundtrack on the Silent Hills recording. That's not Silent Hill. So I will say this, as somebody who came into this soundtrack having never really listened to these scores before, this is an exceptional score. I now have a deep respect for this guy as a composer, and that's not saying anything bad about Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill 1 score. When I was playing Silent Hill 1, I was not really paying attention to the music so much because I was too busy getting creeped out. Yeah. That was one of the first effective horror games I've ever played. Mostly because I was playing it by myself at college. And that was not a good way to play it. the reality is, though, I came into this soundtrack not knowing that the music that was going to be on it was actually going to be the sound effects from the game. I was expecting just the music. I was not expecting the like horrible, nightmarish noise parts to be considered the music. I was expecting that to be sound design, not music. And that's always been the place I kind of approached these soundtracks from. I was like, I don't remember any music in these games because I just remember being creeped out. Silent Hill 1, all I remember is the shamisen, or I think that's the instrument that you actually would call. I'm going to Google that while you respond to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I could definitely see you're like, there's music in these games?
Yeah.
yeah. You know that little drumming and the banging of on the walls and the pans and all that, the weird sounding crap. Yeah, that's the soundtrack of the CD.
Exactly.
How can you listen to that crap? Well, it's really good. What can I say?
Well, whenever I got this soundtrack, I still wasn't listening to Sun yet either. So, and now I love listening to Sun. So, and by the way, that instrument is called a shamisen. I'm not sure if that's what's on the actual soundtrack, but that's the instrument I was thinking about.
You probably aren't wrong.
I would like to think I'm correct, and that's not because I think I know everything, but it's because I would really like to be correct this time. Impressive score, though. It's actually giving me a lease to go out and hunt down the rest of the Silent Hill scores. And I didn't have that before I finally listened to it to do this review. And this is, and I'll be honest, whenever Brandon had told me, oh man, you really got to listen to these things because they're great music, I was like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I can completely understand that response. But, when you really get into those really good tracks, you really have a hard time turning it down.
And I definitely agree now that I've actually listened to it. I'm very impressed with the work that's on here. And use me if my friendly, lovely listeners out there, please take me as the great example here. I did not know what I was getting into. I was really worried about this whenever we decided this was going to be episode 2. I was like, I don't know if I really want to listen to this. And this was even after I've gotten into all this other music that I listened to. Like, I've been listening to Edgar Varese and Sun, like I've already said, and things like this. And I don't know. And here I am, and I really love the album. So if you're afraid that this is not going to be your cup of tea, still give it a try anyway. You may hate it. It's definitely something that you might have to warm up to over time, but if nothing else, listen to it for the opening and closing tracks. These are songs that should definitely be listened to. They are fantastic songs in their own right, even taken away from the game itself. If you take them off the soundtrack, they're still really good songs, but for the album as a whole, they perfect an already very interesting work of ambient music. Yes.
And that is why, once again, overall, this is probably my favorite of his soundtrack.
And that disappoints me a little bit because that means I've got to buy all the ones that are not as good next.
Oh, I mean, only because the other ones, they don't flow as well as this one.
I got you.
I mean, the second one, it actually has more melodic pieces than anything. And I love that one. But in terms of flow, no other score has the flow that this one has.
But very few do, as we've already said. We're repeating ourselves at this point. We should really wrap things up. So, I think we both agree. Find this soundtrack. I think that it's actually available on Amazon.com right now for less than $15.
That's actually cheap for a soundtrack.
Yes. Considering some of the prices that I've paid for video game scores, I've got it right here, $13.98. And it's Amazon Prime too. So if you have Amazon Prime, they will ship it to your house for free for $14. If you don't do this and you like video game music, then you are just really, really stupid, or you don't have any money. But I would say you need this soundtrack. This is a fantastic score, and it's a great. I would actually say you might be able to use this as a good bridge piece to get you into such things as ambient and noise music. I would say it's that good. It is just phenomenal score. Well, I think that is about it for us tonight. Brandon, other than the Silent Hill soundtrack, what have you been listening to lately?
Diablo 3.
Just Diablo 3? You've just been listening to the game?
Yeah, I've been listening to the game as I play it and beat the crap out of all the monsters.
On my end, I've been trying to listen to Suikoden Tierkreis. I'm not pronouncing that correct, I'm sure. I've been listening to that soundtrack. I've been listening to the Xenogear soundtrack. And this week, in addition to that, I've been listening to Killer's Dead and the Ys Silver Collection soundtrack. And I want to close this with a recommendation. If, in addition to the Silent Hill score, listen to the song "I'm Here for You" from, if I remember right, it's from the soundtrack to the Ark of Nepet, blah blah blah. I'm not going to try and pronounce that word. It's the closest you will get to listening to Rainbow without listening to Rainbow.
Oh, you're talking about the E stuff?
Yeah. That song, I mean, aside from the vocals, the guy who's singing, he's not Ronnie James Dio, but the music, it sounds like a Rainbow song. And that's awesome. All right, well, that is it for us tonight. And everybody, we thank you for listening and checking out our show. We would direct you to our Facebook and Twitter feeds to keep up with what we're doing. Right now, we're on a monthly release schedule. If all goes according to plan, we're going to get off of that soon. It's just been very busy for us lately, and all the technical problems we're dealing with is it's disheartening, to say the least.
Yeah, hopefully we won't have those issues much longer.
I really hope not. And
yes, because I will miss seeing my beautiful face on the screen. Okay?
Oh my God, you just said that. I wouldn't even go that far, and I was the one who said we should do this as a video. All right, well, everybody, thank you again for watching, and you all have a great day / night / whenever you are actually listening to this, and we hope you're having a good time. See you later.
See ya.